Part 9, Dominion, Chapter 42. Processions of the Gods. The wall having been broken, the gate having been forced open, what happened at Stonewall would now begin radiating from Greenwich Village to the world. The people of Sumer parade before you. In ancient times, the goddess stood at the center of culture and the pinnacle of its religion. She would seek to do so again. She would begin transforming the rage and violence of Stonewall into a movement. And as her ancient cult involved sacred events and annual commemorations, observances, and festivals, she would now turn Stonewall Uprising into a sacred event to be religiously commemorated annually with its own rituals, observances, and festivals. In the ancient Middle East, she was especially known as the goddess of parades and processions. The ancient hymn, the Holy One, begins. The people of Sumer parade before you, they play the sweet Allah drums before you. Her parades became a central part of Mesopotamian and Middle Eastern popular culture, and at the same time were an intrinsic part of her cult and worship. Therefore, we might expect that the spirit of Ishtar upon its return would seek to commemorate the Stonewall riots with processions and parades. And this is exactly what would happen. The goddess would create a new ritual, a parade, and celebration that would eventually become a central component of American and Western culture. At the same time, it would increasingly take on the aura of a religious festival. The Stonewall Parade. 5 months after Stonewall, gay activists met in Philadelphia and planned a march to commemorate the Stonewall Uprising to take place the following summer in New York City. It was to be repeated every year on the last Sunday of June. 3 other marches were planned for that same weekend. One in San Francisco, one in Chicago, and one in Los Angeles on Hollywood Boulevard. They were to be protest marches and parades at the same time. On June 28, 1970, the 1-year anniversary of the Stonewall riots, the participants gathered in Greenwich Village near Stonewall to begin the Christopher Street Liberation Day March. The name was taken from the march. The name was taken from the street on which riots erupted, beginning with a few hundred participants. The march proceeded up 6th Avenue, where it swelled to a few thousand before reaching its destination at Central Park. As planned, the parade would be repeated every summer as an annual observance. With each passing year, more marches would be held in more cities across America and then around the world. They would be called Gay Liberation Marches, the Gay Pride Parades, and then simply Pride Parades. They all took place at the same time of the year to commemorate the uprising that brought them into existence. The first march in Los Angeles down Hollywood Boulevard was called the Christopher Street West Association Parade to identify it as Stonewall's westward extension. And many of the pride parades and festivities in Europe were part of what was called the Christopher Street Day celebration. All the pride parades, marches, processions, and festivities had as their birthplace Stonewall. Could even this go back to an ancient mystery? The Gate of Ishtar, the most famous entranceway leading into ancient Babylon, was the Gate of Ishtar. It was the starting point of the city's processional way. The great Babylonian parades would begin at the gate, then proceed down a half-mile road of ornate walls adorned with painted images. The goddess presided as queen of the great Babylonian processions and parades, and thus was the one who inaugurated them at her entranceway. So too it was the goddess who inaugurated the processions and parades that would cover the modern world. They began at Stonewall, the ground of her manifesting. Stonewall was her modern-day entranceway, the gate against which she pounded until it opened. Stonewall was the modern world's gate of Ishtar, so it was no accident that it would become the inauguration point and launching ground from which the parades of millions would begin. And so, as in ancient times, the most ubiquitous of the modern world's parades was set in motion at the gate of the goddess. Processional way. The ancient parades began at Ishtar's gate, made their way through the processional way to the temple of Marduk, the city's central thoroughfare. So the parades inaugurated by the goddess in the late 20th century began in New York City, a Babylon of modern times, and proceeded along the city's central thoroughfare. And as the processions of Ishtar began at the gate, so the pride parades began in New York City, the gate of America. They would then make their way through the central thoroughfares of the great cities of the modern world, and then trickle down to the smaller ones. Gate of the Two Arches. As the ancient parades of the goddess began at the city wall, so her modern parades began at that which was named after a wall, Stonewall. The ancient parades began at the gate bearing the goddess's name, an entranceway covered with bricks. The modern parades of Ishtar were inaugurated at Stonewall, the wall of which was, like the gate of Ishtar, covered with bricks. The gate of the goddess was made up of two brick-covered archways, a smaller and a greater. The Stonewall Inn, likewise, possessed two brick-covered archway entrances, a smaller and a greater. In fact, it was these arch entrances that the mob of the Stonewall riots sought to break open and go through. As in ancient times, the massive processions and parades of the goddess began at the wall and the brick-covered arches of her gate. The lion, the bull, and the dragon. The gate of Ishtar was famous for its depictions of the lion, a symbol of the goddess. Thus the ancient processions began under a sign of the lion. The processions, birthed at Stonewall, also began under a sign of a lion. In that the lion's head marked the site of the uprising that birthed the parades. It was through the Ishtar gate that the gods entered the city in the form of idols and images. The gate and walls of the processional way were adorned with symbols of the gods, lions, dragons, and bulls. The lion, as we have seen, represented Ishtar. The dragon represented the god Marduk, who in Babylonian mythology was a lover of Ishtar. In the Bible, the dragon, of course, is also a symbol of Satan, and the bull was a symbol of the god Adad. In the land of the Canaanites, Adad was Hadad, and Hadad was Baal. Gateway of the gods. So the gate of Ishtar was the entranceway, the portal through which the gods entered. Thus the question, Could the entrance of Ishtar at Stonewall, from which the modern processions were born, likewise serve as a portal, the gateway of the gods? In ancient times, Ishtar's parades would draw the people into her worship, so they would again. The celebrations were in essence spiritual and even religious in nature. In a panoply of music and color, American and Western culture were being entranced into the worship of the goddess. If behind the parades of Pride Month were the processions of the goddess, could the descriptions of the ancient pageants give us revelations into the spectacles of our day?